Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I am chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel are Doug Marks, who is sitting in Boardroom C, and Richard Whitbread joining via Zoom. Our assessor today is Matthew Harling, and our administrative personnel is Twinkle Sharma. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 2, and 7 on our docket today. Ms. Sharma, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Sure. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Harling.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much. Applicant for item 1, please state your full name.
Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Neufeld.
We cannot hear you, Mr. Neufeld.
Yeah, that's fine. I was making coffee. I turned it off. Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Applicant for item 2 and 7, please state your full name.
Person Horsborough.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to provide at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start hearing two matters at the same time, given we have an appeal from both the tenant and the owner of the property. So we'll start with item number 1 first, which is the applicant is Mr. Neufeld. So Mr. Harling, you can start with your evidence, please.
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so the file number is 24-4430. The roll number is 140-999-63100, and the address is 2529 Inkster Boulevard. And the owner is 3M Investments Innsbruck Incorporated. The 2025 roll year, based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023, is assessed at $6,111,000. If you look under page 1 of my brief, under the property description information, we'll see this is a industrial warehouse we classify as industrial warehouse. The actual and effective year built range are 2008. We have wall heights of 28 feet. It is a fireproof steel frame building, and it is zoned for M2 manufacturing general. We have a total land area of 120,919 square feet with a plan area of 25,890 square feet, which then gives us a land to plan area of 4.67. And then lastly, we have a total leasable area of 29,730 square feet. Okay, so if we turn to page 2 of my brief, we'll just see there's the request for information is in there. There have been no recent sales on the property, and we do not currently have a subject lease in place in our system. Okay, if we turn to page 3 of my brief, we can see the subject location. So as indicated, this is on Inkster Boulevard. So at the very top here, you can just see an aerial view of the subject property or a Google map view, just to see where it's situated here. So we have Innsbruck. It's also just off of Innsbruck Drive. Oak Point Highway is very close by as well. If we go to page, the bottom of page 3, this is just an aerial. This is an aerial view here, just to show the property where you can see the red dot. All right, now if we turn to page 4, this is just the parcel outline of the subject, so you just get an idea of the property, how it's situated in the parcel of land. And then this continues also on page 5. This is just a more closer up view, just again to see, so you can see Inkster Boulevard here, and then just on the west side or east side of the subject is Innsbruck Drive. Here's a further photo on page 6, just a different aerial view. We turn to page 7. This just gives us kind of an isometric view of the subject, so you can kind of just see it from an angle, so you can get an idea of the property, how it's situated. Page 8 of my brief, this is the subject just from the east side. You can see here for the main entrances here, and then they have a little parking area here. You can see the overhead loading bay doors on the one side of the building. Page 9, this is just a rear photo of the subject. And if we turn to page 10, you'll see the west side of the building. So you can see here, again, similar to the other side, it's got we have the loading bay doors on the one side, so they have loading bay doors on both sides. Page 10 of my brief, this is just a street view photo from the front facing Inkster Boulevard, so you can just see the subject property and the building itself. We turn to page 11, this is just a further view from the subject on Inkster, just further to the west of the property. And then on page 11 at the bottom here, this is just again from the east portion of the building on Innsbruck Drive facing the subject. So you can get an idea of just a closer view of just the actual building, what it looks like. And then lastly on page 12 of my brief, this is just a further photo of the property from the west side, just further up Innsbruck Drive, just to get an idea of seeing the overall property in its entirety. So I think I was gonna say maybe we just turn to page 18 of my brief. This is just a floor plan of the subject. So just to give you the layout of the building, since we're speaking about the pictures and everything. So we turn to page 18 in my brief. This is just a floor plan of the building we have on file. So you can kind of just see how it's broken up. It might be hard to see, but the main portion here when you enter the building, we have a little bit of like a kind of an office retail space, a little portioning here. There is office space. There is a second floor office space we have as well. If you just look to the east or west of that, there's a warehouse space, and then just north of that, there's like the service space, where you see those loading bay doors. So just to give you, this is just kind of give you a breakdown of just the floor plan of just how the building is laid out. I have not physically inspected the property. I have been by it recently, like a cursory exterior inspection. So, but I have not physically been in the building. So I'm mindful. I just to let the board know that. But this is just kind of a breakdown of how the building is laid out. Okay, so if we can turn back now to page 13 of my brief, this is the income workup. So as indicated, we classify this as a storage warehouse. We have a total leasable area of 29,730 square feet. We're applying a model rent of $10.36 a square foot, which gives us a potential rent of $308,003. We're applying 3%, or allowing 3.5% for vacancy, which then gives us an overall effective gross income of $297,223. We're allowing 3% for non-workable expenses, as well as $4 a square foot shortfall cost to cover vacancy, which then gives us an overall net operating income of $284,144. And then lastly, we're applying an overall capitalization rate of 4.65%, which then gives us the estimated value of $6,111,000. Okay, we turn to page 14 in my brief. These are the rent comparables. So we can kind of see here some of the locations. So we have King Edward Street, Cole Avenue, Lawson Crescent, King Edward, Clarence, Haggard, and Day Street. So these are some of the comparables, trying to find comparables of similar sized buildings as close as possible to age. Obviously, this building is a bit newer, so I wasn't able to find a number of newer ones, but there's just a kind of a range of comparables here. So if the closest one would be the one on Haggard, but the lease start dates range from June 1st, 2019 to January 1st, 2021. We have lease terms ranging from 4 to 10 years. Leasable areas range from 10,000 square feet to 30,240 square feet. The wall heights range from 14 feet to 38 feet. And the effective rear builds range from 1960 to 2020. And then we have the net rents in place range from $9.32 a square foot to $11.50 a square foot. So these are the rent comparables that we have applied for the property subject. Okay, if we turn to page 15 of my brief, this is just information regarding the cap rates. So as I indicated, the cap rate is 4.65%. So I will note, this is the cap rate is a lower cap rate, so I'm mindful of that. Even looking at some of the outside sources, it does fall out the 28th percentile of our subject. Some of the factors that would derive that would be factors such as age, size, location, access, land to plan ratio. Those would be the factors that derive the cap rate. So it does fall outside the 28th percentile, and I believe, based on some of the factors of the building, I believe, being it's a newer building, it's got a good land to plan ratio, the age, some of the and the layout. I don't believe a lower cap rate is not. I believe a lower cap rate would be appropriate, but I'm mindful of the fact of yes, it is a lower cap rate we have at 4.65%. So. Page 16 of my brief is just some municipal assessment actors group information. And then on page 17 of my brief, this is the rent roll that we received with the mailer. So just indicating the actual rent that they are paying. So there is a lease in place. It started in 2008 and it's leased to 2023. So but this is the lease in place and this is what they are paying at this time. So so I just want to get the board know that. Page 18 of my brief, we've already spoken to due to the fact of the floor plan, just giving the layout of the building. And as I indicated, I have not physically inspected the building, but I was able to find a picture online. This is on page 19. This is just the main entrance of the building here. So you can kind of just see here. So this is kind of like a little, like I said, I haven't inspected the product. This is kind of like a little bit of a retail space. I understand here, but it's a combination of office retail in the main building. You can kind of see the top left-hand corner. There's some windows there for some office space as well. So, so that's just a picture I was able to find online. As I indicated, I had inspected it. So, and I'll just mention too, like the tenant in there is a company called Wajax, which I'm sure Mr. Will hear more about the tenant, but yeah, but that's the tenant that's currently occupying the space. And then lastly, on page 20 is just some market vacancy reports to support our vacancy rate we have applied. So that being said, I believe that would conclude my presentation and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harling. So we'll start with you, Mr. Neufeld. Do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. You have this classified on page 1 and page 13 as a storage warehouse, correct?
Yeah, that's just the classification we've applied, correct, yeah.
And I'm looking at all your pictures. Maybe tell me where the storage warehouse is.
Well, if you actually look on page, like I kind of showed on page, it might be hard to see, but in the floor plan we have on file on page 18,
Okay.
classified of it's more to the, I guess if you can kind of see the office space just adjacent to it, I guess on the
Right.
rest of it, that's what we classify as that warehouse space there. So
Well, behind the office. Okay, now, so but referencing that particular page, I count 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 truck bays, but not about right?
roughly about that, yeah, yeah.
So from this picture, I'm just estimating that maybe 70% of it is comprised of truck bays, is it not?
Oh yeah, there's a good the portion of it is the storage base, correct? Yeah, the space back
So
there. Yeah.
why wasn't this classified as vehicle service garage then?
Well, I mean, it's not really like in terms of I don't like. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, I haven't been in the building, but I mean, I don't know why would we classify as a vehicle service garage? Like it does have a combination. So I guess it's a multi-use building. So
Well, what does the tenant do for business?
from my understanding, they do well, like, just as a way able to look on them. So they do like sell. They have sales, parts, and services. They deal with a bunch of industries such as forestry, mining, industrial, commercial, oil sands, that kind of thing. So.
What do they do at this site? Do you know?
But this, like, I mean, I understand they do servicing in the back there, yeah. So,
Well, again, I'm just wondering why not with the predominant use of it, clearly from the pictures indicating a truck service garage. What would be the point of classifying this as a warehouse? Would the number? Okay, so I'll make this a question. Would your valuation be different if this were classified as a vehicle service garage rather than a warehouse?
I mean, I don't have the exact answer. I'd have to go into that, but there's a potential, yes. So,
Okay. On your page, your rent page, you had mentioned you had looked for size, and age was one of the factors. But have you gone through the usages of these particular locations that you've provided as rent comparables?
yeah, I mean, a lot of these would be there's a combination of some of them being storage warehouses and different uses, yeah. So I'm mindful of that.
Well, like for example, coal is a retail tool sales, is it not?
Yeah, that is correct. That's that.
Okay.
They also do have some service there, from my understanding. So, I think I've been to this property before. So,
Okay. And Lawson Crescent, I was under the impression that this was a fitness facility with artificial ice. Isn't that true?
You know what? I'd have to double check. If you give me a moment, I can verify that. So, Lawson, I believe. Let me just see here. We have I believe the tenant there's walls and walls fences we have. So
At 91?
Oh, 91. This is not 91. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Not 91. I apologize. You were I'm at 91 now. Sorry, I was looking at 90. So yeah, I believe you are correct, Mr. Yeah, that is the
Okay.
tenant. And there is oh no, we have Aircon Technical Solutions, so I don't believe it's a nice so.
Okay. Well, it was okay. I'm wondering. I think the place is essentially a very large artificial ice rink, so that's fine. And the balance of most of these are then warehouses then?
Yeah, the majority of them would be warehouses, yeah.
Okay. And do you think there's a difference in the use in a economic life between a service garage and a warehouse?
There would be some variation in the differences of age, effective life, or economic life, yeah.
Yeah, okay. In regard to your capitalization rates, did you present any transactions here, or is just this is all model based?
Correct. Yeah, there's no. I don't have any. I'm not showing any sales or anything like that for cap rates. No.
Page 15. I take it that this is from the Rose Marked Industrial.
For which part? For which?
It's a York the cap rate. Rose that they're all. This is an industrial based capitalization.
Oh yeah, these are for industrial properties. Correct. Yeah.
And as I understand, maybe you can confirm this, that the city does not make a distinction on these industrial rates. All of your rate tables are the same. Is that correct?
In terms of like, are the cap rates that we apply to properties?
Well, that you like the market distinguishes industrial by usage. The city does not, right?
No, we would look at we look at market. Yeah, we would look at sales of cap rates and derive our cap rates from that. So yeah.
And the cap rate applied is below your 20th percentile, correct?
Yeah, I believe I indicated that.
Is there any evidence you brought forward to prove that this was a better capitalization rate risk than any other industrial building?
No, I don't believe I put everything there.
Okay.
So.
And the rates provided by the three real estate companies, they appear to be significantly higher than what you've applied. Did you not give them any weight? These are the people who buy and sell buildings. No one's got anything as low as 4.65. Any thought given to maybe your rates might be a little bit artificially low?
Well, I believe I kind of mentioned that when I spoke to Mr. Neufeld. I indicated
Yeah,
that-
no, I know you did. I just wanted to hear it again. uh, and last question in regard to the shortfall. The shortfall, just remind us all, is the cost to occupy to maintain the site per square foot when vacant, correct?
Correct, yes.
Was there any sort of double check system that you have on this for determining if it's reasonable? Like, for example, the estimated taxes on this site are $5 a square foot, and your shortfall is $4, which includes taxes, utilities, repair and maintenance. So if you have a highly taxed site, shouldn't the shortfall reflect that in your model?
Well, Mr. Neufeld, we're not doing this on a site-specific basis, so we are doing a mass appraisal, so I'm mindful of that. But yes, we don't put specific shortfalls in specific properties like that. So,
well, no, I understand that we all know that this is, of course, a site-specific question I'm asking, but couldn't the model be geared to do this? Because your shortfall rate is directly attached to the assessment. So couldn't the model figure a way out to adjust it accordingly?
I don't have that information, so I can't.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Horsborough, questions for the assessor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of my questions have been asked and answered by Mr. Neufeld. I suppose I just wanted to confirm that the cap rate at 4.65%, that's a model derived cap rate. Is that correct, Mr. Harling?
That is correct, Mr. Horsborough, yes.
Okay, that's really just the one point that I wanted to clarify. So thank you. I'll defer to the board for further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Horsborough. Mr. Marks, do you have questions for the assessor?
I do not. My question's been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I want to drill down on the cap rate a little bit with you, Mr. Howling. I look at this property and I see, from my appearance, it looks like a pretty good piece of property. It's clean. It's in a good location. All of the factors that you talk about in terms of determining cap rate seem to be favorable. Is that correct?
Yeah, like some of the factors I indicated, yeah, I believe it is a good location. It's a good building. It's newer. It's got a good land plan, for sure. So those are factors that I would say are true.
Right. Yeah. And so is it true that the cap rate is a factor of sort of the investment risk, or it's related to the investment risk that an investor might take in purchasing a building or a property such as this?
Yeah. Cap rate would be essentially a form of determining risk. Essentially, yes, that would be a good way of explaining it. Yes.
Sure. So if I look at a highly, if this property, hypothetically, if this property were in a poorer area of the city, or if it was run down and had some other problems, you might see a higher cap rate. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Locational factors, age, size, well, those would be all factors that would derive a cap rate. Correct. Yeah.
Sure. And that would subsequently drop the value of the building.
Yeah, exactly. If it's like, yeah, you could, higher cap rate would be, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
Right. Do you have the ability in working with the model to take a hard look at at a factor such as the cap rate and make an adjustment to that cap rate yourself or as a team as you sort of look at it and say, well, ooh, that doesn't seem to jive with what we know about this property, and then adjust it accordingly, or do you just accept the model rate?
I mean, like, obviously we try to do review properties when we can. Obviously it's very challenging to get through all the properties. So yeah, I'm not saying we can't make adjustments here and there on things if we, if it's warranted, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do that with this one?
No, I did not get a chance to really go in depth on this property.
Okay, so you simply accepted the model. I'm not downplaying that.
Oh,
You
yeah, no, for sure.
the model rate.
Correct.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitbread. I think my questions have been asked and answered too. Mr. Neufeld, then we are on to your presentation. Oh, you are muted. Yeah, thank you.
Just a bit of background on this particular property, it was originally built as Inksbrook Developments in the mid 90s by a fellow by the name of Klaus Rossler. And I was working for all of these clients on the Inkster frontage, including Fort Garry Industries to the immediate east, as well as Mr. Danilchuk, who owned this property for a while, and Mr. Usician, who owned future Tormont lands to the north. So my involvement dates back to 1996. Mr. Danilchuk took his properties. He had about 21 acres, subdivided it into four lots, one for his Peterbilt dealership, the other three went up for sale. And miraculously, 12 years later, he was able to sell it. That gives you an idea of the absorption, the desirability of this. And the reason he was able to sell it is because at the time the tenant was Watrous Industries, and Watrous specialized in hydraulic fluids, hydraulic systems for trucks, transport vehicles. And this was the natural intersection at the time in Winnipeg at Inkster and Brookside. For this, considering Fort Garry Industries was next door, the specialist in trailers and brakes, and Peterbilt was beside it. This was truck land. And when they made the deal, they had a real estate company go across the country, and they developed, I believe, 11 sites in different Canadian cities, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, a couple in the Toronto area, and Winnipeg. The rents were all the same. That's the way they made them. Build to suit. Everybody got the same rent. So if you're in Toronto, you're paying the same rent as Winnipeg and Saskatoon, and Vancouver was the same. That's why we don't look at the lease that's in place as being of any relevance. Now, Watrous was ended up. I can't remember the exact process, but Wajax took over the operation, and they do the same thing. So this is not warehousing. This is not retail sales. This is pure and simply repair of hydraulic systems on vehicles. You blow a cylinder on the highway, you come in to them and they fix you up with a new one, or they repair it and they rebuild it, or that's what this does. Now, since this time, the migration of the transport industry has been to Centerport. So the new perfect location for this would not be at this intersection any longer, because the traffic is not conducive to the trucking industry. It's on Canada Way. So I would think its lifespan is limited on that basis for this particular usage. And there might be another usage come along, maybe used car sales or something once these expire. But I no longer think that this would be deemed to be the excellent location for repairing transport vehicles. That's the background on it. And what we ended up looking at on the valuation were some rents of properties. And on our page 2, we have a list of them. Now, our primary reasoning when we look at rents is to make sure they're clean and clear of influences. For example, the subject rent would never make our list because we knew that it was made under, we'll call it under duress or under creative financing. That doesn't match market value. All of these that we've got are clean deals. No improvements, no amortizing tenant improvements, no getting an allowance for something. It's clean in what it's for, and we placed it at the top of the scale because it is the current utility is not bad. The rest of the risks should be addressed in the on the cap rate. And that was 775. The rest of the city's parameters are fine, with the exception of shortfall. You heard me ask already. The taxes are $5 a foot. How can you have a shortfall at $4? It goes empty. You're paying $5 a foot. and your utilities are going to be $1.20 to $1.40 a square foot, and then repair and maintenance. So this is one of the issues with doing models, is that one size does not fit all. Lastly, in terms of the capitalization rate, we have some numbers on it now. Firstly, there were some questions about location as far as cap rates go. All due respect, I disagree. The cap rate is the major feature for the cap rate is the interest rate, because it's always the money. It's always about money. So you follow the money. Now on our page, should I rehearse this? Our page 38, this is the Bank of Canada prime rate. So this is what the Bank of Canada charges banks. Banks have an upcharge on that, and then the client pays the upcharge. They get a loan, they take out a loan on a mortgage on their property, and they have to repay it. And a cap rate is essentially is a tool of banking. It's not meant for us people in arguing about assessments, because it doesn't. These aren't the issues that drive the cap rate. What drives it is a bank comes and says, "You want to borrow money? You got to earn enough to pay your mortgage." Pure and simple. In April 1st, 2023, Bank of Canada prime was 4.75%, which means that you're going to be at an end user probably 6.5%, 7% loan rates. You don't cap at 4.65 because you lose money, and the bank won't lend you the money, so therefore the cap does not exist. And I'm trying to paraphrase a concept that I could bore you to death for hours and hours talking about it. I'm just giving you the very, very quick version. Stick to the interest rate. You'll never be steered wrong by caps. And I also wanted to interject something else here. I'm not a tax agent by trade. I'm an appraiser. I have a designation. I belong to the Appraisal Institute. So I do work. 75% of my work is not tax appeal. It's actually doing appraisals on property. This is what I do for a living. And this isn't argument. This is fact. If you ignore an interest rate, you're misleading the user of the report, because it's what it's all about, is the interest rate. Now we haven't had a great deal of investment industrial sales in Winnipeg for the period preceding the reference date, and one of the reasons why is because all these deals were usually done with a lower cap rate prior to the period. You could see the interest rates, and an investor was not going to get value for his money, so it was more of a wait and see attitude, and was holding. Now, if you're not getting transactions, that does not give you license to use an old cap rate. You have to determine what would be a cap rate at the time of the reference. You don't ignore it and say it'll pass. We'll get one from 2 years old. 2 years prior, the Bank of Canada rate was 0.5 point, so you're getting loans at under 4%. So you could do that. Now the actual cap rates in the Collier's report for this, and you can see they're in our report as well. We had to issue a correction on Q1 2023 because it was done in error, and subsequent to this, to the finding the error, it was actually me who found the error, and since I opened my big mouth, they made me in charge of the cap rate for Winnipeg. So now you'll see my name on it, signing it off. And I'm not boasting about anything. It's a job I didn't really want, but the idea is that you're going to understand that when we do our cap rates, we come from the market. We don't have a machine to do it. I go and I interview all the people who sell these properties. I look at their data, and then we put on the rates. Now, this does not qualify as an A or a B. It's a service garage. It's not the greatest, but if you look at our tables, and the Q4 2022, which I did not prepare, indicates a B of 6.5 to 7.5. And that's about the closest we'll get on this property. Now, an A, we've shown you some pictures on page and give you an idea of what constitutes the grades of these things on page 48. So bottom of page 48 is an A, and this is a modern flex warehouse. So-called flex because it's got a 30-foot base, 100 deep. 100 is no coincidence, accommodated a semi-trailer, 30 wide, accommodated a semi-trailer, minimum 24 high, accommodated a semi-trailer. And then you have the flexes because you can add on an additional 3,000 square foot base to build your space as required, and move it and change it. Somebody wants to build an office on the second floor, as the picture shows, go ahead, do it. You can do anything with it. It's called flex. A B, which is characterized by the picture at the top of page 49, is pretty much a build to suit for a specific cause. No matter how good the quality is, it's still a B because it's not flex-like. And that's as close as we could get to our subject. And that's why we came up with the cap rate we did at 7.25. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Harling, do you have questions for Mr. Neufeld?
I just have a few questions, yes. I guess first question I would like to ask Mr. Neufeld is, so I know you kind of went into page 2 of your brief, speaking to the rents you applied. So you're using the rent of $775. Now, you've indicated that this should be classified more as a vehicle service garage. So I guess the comps, the comparables you've used with these, or any of these vehicle service garages that you've indicated at all, or no?
I just have to, no, I don't think so. These are just mixed industrial use, mix of warehouse, office warehouse, manufacturing.
Okay, because I mean, I guess because I know you use the rent of $775 a square foot, and I think the closest rent comparable is the one on 5055 St. James. So that's a storage warehouse. I'm sure you're familiar with that building. That's an older building. It's got lower wall heights. It's part of like a larger complex of buildings. So would those have some variations on the rent? If it's,
well, it's on St. James for one. So St. James is in the middle of what we call gentrification. A lot of it was M3. City's pushing it to M2 to allow greater retail uses right now. And that process started about 6 or 7 years ago. Basically in St. James, you'll find a wider degree of uses. Therefore, more, we call the term is bid rent. There are more people who would want space on St. James than the corner of Inkster and Brookside, and that ends up driving the prices up. And that particular facility is it's not Flex Warehouse, but it's one of the genesis of Flex Warehouses, one of the early attempts at getting there. It's a flex use space, but not so much by the units, but by the composition, because there's a separate office building and then there's a separate industrial building. It's again, our quest, unlike the city, our quest is to provide clean rents first and foremost. So unless most all of these, I have the leases on them, so we know they're clean, the deals are clean, there's no other influences in them. And that's when you're determining market value of fee simple, that's what you're trying to strive. You're not trying to find out if someone got $100,000 in his lease for improvements or to do with what she likes. You want to know the deal was just for real estate. That's what I'm trying to accentuate here.
Okay, and then I guess just because just to go, catch on that question. So coming back to the vehicle service garage thing, the vehicle service garages, would those typically are higher? Would those be higher rents than the storage warehouses would you would see for a vehicle service garage?
I can't even think of a rent for a vehicle service garage except for the chain operations like Goodyear, but those are actually all internal these days. They typically do not rent because they're not really seen as a good investment, because they're one of the major reasons is if you have a warehouse, you're generally able to keep your environmental status fairly clean, if as long as what you're not storing hazardous material. And on that note, I know where all the hazardous material storage buildings are in the city. We don't use them. But in a service garage, someone once asked me at a board, how would you know a service garage has an environmental issue? And I said, because it's a service garage. By nature it is. And we have not gone down that road. But I think that anyone who deals with hydraulic fluids is going to be put on the environmental list or is on the environmental list. And anyone who does work on cars is on the environmental list. So as a result, banks don't like to touch them with as much, and investors shy away because they can't get good mortgages on them. The reasoning is the investor buys a service garage and says, I'd like to borrow some money so I can get the mortgage to work for me and get greater equity return on it. And the bank says, yeah, we're not giving you 70% ratio anymore because you've got an environmental issue. We're giving you 50% and we're throwing 2 points on the interest rate. And we want a shorter amortization period. And all of a sudden it just doesn't work. That's, again, I'm giving you long answers to your questions, but because none of this is really, this all deserves a medium length answer, but that's why you're not going to find too many service garage rates. And I mentioned Goodyear, they have them, but now all of their sites are done by a non-arm's length corporation. So there's really nothing out there anymore.
Okay. And just, I think you kind of mentioned this. I just want to maybe just get a little clarification. So to derive the cap rate, you've applied at 7.25%. Is that like I know you've indicated how you've looked at the interest rates and things, that's how your position is. So is that like, how did you derive it again? Was this using?
Well, we looked at the Colliers Industrial B range as leading it, and we do a little work up here on our page 1. And we start with the best cap rate possible, and the Colliers book is 6.5, and we look at the deficiencies that this has in relation to a top performing one at 6.5, and then judge it accordingly. And where we would have the concern is on the quality and condition, being a service garage, and that pops us into about a 7.39 area, which fits into the Colliers B. The lack of transactions during this period is quite troubling, and I know we are always coming to the board and saying nobody's got caps for this period. From the period of when interest rates started going crazy, I think the date was April 1st, 2021, until late 2023. The sales dried up. Now I got a lot of work in my other capacity on receivership jobs, but not so much on transferring for a fee simple for investment purposes.
And I think we've kind of had discussion about this, but I just wanted to kind of maybe get a little bit more in depth on this. So I know you've indicated, you said the lease in places across Canada, and you shouldn't be putting any weight on it. So can you maybe just elaborate, like why, like is that a common thing you've seen? Like why is it this like this?
Yeah, I mean, we see it on properties where they need a national presence and they're very weak on the real estate side, and there'll be a national based development company, which happened in this case, who was able to set these locations up across the country. So the operating company would say, we want a location near where, in this case, where the trucks go. And then the real estate development company would find the site, get the approval, and they would do the development. And then they kind of like throw all the numbers in a hat and add them all up and say, well, our going rates across Canada, when this started, I think was 11 something a foot on plus renewals at rates that were already predetermined, and that evened out the country for them. And incidentally, this is not you asked about examples. This actually is taking a principle that Transport Canada employs, or did employ at aerodromes across the country, because the traffic across the country, you know, if you took off in Toronto and you landed in Saskatoon, they felt that there should be some equity, and so the land rents for Toronto were the same as Saskatoon, and the same as Red Lake, and the same as Red Deer, and the same as Vancouver, and the same as Winnipeg. It was a $3 something per square meter for land rents. So this evened it out, and because road transportation in Canada is a federal prerogative, the rails, the airports, and the roadways. So this is where the philosophy comes from. And there are companies, you know, the regionals can't participate in this. Some of my clients are regional carriers. They do their market as they see it, but on the national basis, you'll see this sort of practice.
Okay, you know what? I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harling. Mr. Whitbread, do you have questions for Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, thank you. So if you have a situation, Mr. Neufeld, where one wants to change the parcel usage definition, cities define this as a warehouse, you're defining it as a service, vehicle service station or unit. Whose responsibility is it to change that? Or appeal that or request a change?
It's always the city, and you can direct them, you can tell them, you can ask them. You know, they don't often change it. It's the sort of thing that you bring to appeal and you point out to a board and say, yeah, they kind of got the coding wrong here. Do we know what the difference? We don't know what the differences are. I don't know what if service garage is going to come a higher number or a lower number, right, on the model. So we start off by simply saying it's an error, and then look at common sense. That I say a garage gets the building beat to death, as opposed to a warehouse.
Sure. But you're going beyond my question now. I just want to know whose responsibility it is to make application to have that change. And you're saying
I don't know if there's a process to make application to change it. I mean, there is for class, right? If I said this was a daycare, I could go contact 311 and say it's a daycare, change my class. I don't know about the code, the puck code.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I redirect to Mr. Harling?
Yeah, Mr. Harling, are you able to answer Mr. Whitbread's question?
Yeah, you know, I don't, unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer, but you know what? I mean, like I said, I have not inspected the properties myself personally. So potentially, you know, if it's, you know, we have made changes on potential properties if it warrants it. So maybe this is something we could look at, and we could look at it in the future and take a look. I can't say for certain, but you know, like you're right. As Mr. Neufeld mentioned, it doesn't come up a lot unless there's something to definitively show that should be changed.
But my question is, and I think most of you are reasonable people at the city department. If I were to come in as a tenant and say, guys, look, come and visit and take a look at my operation. This is a vehicle service operation. This is not a warehouse. Would you not respond to that in some manner?
Oh yeah, for sure. If we get like an inquiry or someone looking into that, that definitely would be something we'd look into. Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
I mean, and yeah, like, yeah, you know, I'm not gonna, yeah, I could go into it, but yeah, no, yes, but definitely. Yeah.
And if the owner were to do it on behalf of the tenant, you might also respond the same way. Is that true?
Oh, it'd be the same difference because they're the owner, of course, right? So they're tending out the space, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Sure. So is it the board's responsibility to make that change?
You know, I don't believe that would be something that we could. I mean, that's something you could, you know. Yeah, you know, I don't have the answer to that. I'm not gonna. You
don't know? Okay.
Yeah, you know, so I'm not gonna.
Let me go back. Let me go back to Mr. Neufeld. And Mr. Neufeld, do you think it's the board's responsibility to make a change such as?
Well, I can only tell you what an example from the past, and the neighboring property, which is Peterbilt, as well as a couple of other truck dealers on Brookside and Oak Point, are classed by the city as complete vehicle dealerships. And the modeling for complete vehicle dealerships tends to be C2 to C4 based operations, retail-based operations, rather than M2, M3 zoned truck facilities. So for the past 25 years, I've been saying to them, they shouldn't be complete MCVCD, complete CMVCD, complete vehicle garages. And my pleas have fallen on deaf ears. So answer your question, 1895 Brookside, 1 year treated as an industrial. Next year, as an auto dealership. Next year, industrial. So we've got these.
Sorry, Mr. Goodall, let me interrupt you, but treated by who? The city?
Oh, by the board. The
So
board's
the board
decisions.
has made that decision.
Yeah, the board.
Yeah.
It's a mixed decision. Where 1 year they'll change the value to industrial. Next year they'll confirm it as is. And everything's sitting at the municipal board on all of these for the truck dealerships and so I think what I'm trying to say, it's been, as you said earlier, are we all reasonable people? What is this really?
Okay.
And I think that anything that's located in this area is and servicing trucks is not the same as a warehouse. So
Thank you. So let me ask you my second question then. Are you asking us to view this as a vehicle service operation as opposed to a warehouse?
yes, I am.
Because your evidence was kind of mixed. You swung back and forth from
Well,
warehouse evidence to vehicle service evidence. So straighten me out here.
You're looking for the smoking gun on the evidence, and there isn't really one. A garage is worth less than warehousing. Warehousing was one of the few industries in COVID that really took off because everybody needed storage space for the protective equipment, and the rents were incredibly good. And now they're slipping back down. So in this particular time period, the market was much hotter for a warehouse. So you can't, here's the question I put. Could you, in the reference year, if I needed to rent space, I'm the provincial government and I needed to store my COVID testing equipment, would I consider renting this space? No way. It's not clean.
Gotcha. Let me swing to my second set of questions, or third question, I guess. So if I'm reading information correctly, I found a rent roll on page 17, and I believe it's in the evidence presented by Mr. Harling. Can you go there?
Yeah.
Tell me when you get there.
There, I'm 17. Yes, I got it.
Yeah, that rent per area, is that a per square foot $15?
That's correct.
And that's a net rent, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah, because the total.
Yeah, it is. Yes, I have.
$18.70.
Yes, we have the lease. We know it to be a net rent.
Okay, so it seems like we're being asked to disregard that lease of 15 years at $15 an hour or a unit. Now it may not have always been 15, but what I see here is $15. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, as I discussed earlier, it contains two issues that would not make it meet market value. One is the creative financing, and one is undue pressure. Those are the two of the 4 or 5 major components of defining market value. And there's no such thing as adjusting for these issues, because you have to adjust for motivation. And my background on this was, not only do I work for the current tenant, but I used to work for the former owner who put these together. So our background information is solid. We knew how these deals were constructed. I mentioned about, they were developing, I think 11 locations at the same time across the country, and gave everybody the same rate. That's doesn't meet market value definition. There's some things you can adjust for, and some things you can't. Motivation, you can't. You ask the guy who did it, like, were you 300% motivated or 50% motivated? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I was 62%.
This business is still solvent, is it not?
Yes.
Yes, and so that model, that business model seems to have worked for this business.
Yeah, but we're correct. We're talking about business value though now, so you've changed the subject on us.
Yeah, a little
Moved
bit.
it from real estate to business enterprise.
All right. I'm still trying to get my head around that $15 rent versus the $7.75. But I have no further questions. You've done a good job of explaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread. Mr. Marks, questions?
And just one question. So if it's a service garage for heavy duty trucks, it's not looked at as a storage area after that because of the contamination factor that may come into play?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it as a storage garage, you got to think about cost to convert it, right? So you've got, I don't know, 15 doors. You're not running a warehouse with 15 doors, so you're going to close some doors, convert the wall structure. You got to rip out the hoists and do a cleanup if it's possible, and then see if you can put in racking in there that'll have some utility. So if you look at the configuration of it, it could be a small scale warehouse for items that were, maybe automobile parts. Who's the Napa guys? Yeah, something like that, maybe for the size of it. But you're certainly not looking at people who sell pallets and pallets of stuff off semi trailers. In that case, you want a space that's like maybe minimum of 50,000 feet up to maybe 150,000 feet. But there's a use for it. But it costs money to change it. That's all. And the other thing about it that was a bit troubling is if you notice the overhead view, I don't know who's got the best one here. On the assessors on page 6 isn't bad. The goal of any storage warehouse would be to fit semi trailers in. So you need 125-foot turning circle, and the building is sited wrong for it. They deal with tractors, the semi trailer tractor, which is I forget the length of it. It's I don't know, like 20, 28, 27, 28 feet.
So they're not dealing with the trailer, just the tractors themselves.
Right. And whereas the neighbor, Fort Garry Industries, who deal in trailers, you can see that their front yard is like 3 times as deep because the trailers have to turn around, and they'll have a drive-through bay with a 200-foot turning circle on the other side. So that's it would probably be less limited. I'm looking at it here. I think you could probably back a semi up to the front doors. Possibly not the greatest, but it might be. Yeah, you wouldn't have this as a modern design that anyone would really like.
Thank you, Mr. Newfield. No further questions.
Thank you. So, Mr. Neufeld, just going back to the rent that's showing on the lease is $15. That is the lease amount you're saying that is applied right across Canada,
Yes, that's correct.
even in Toronto?
Yeah, that was the deal. That was, and I'm going back to information I was given like 12 years ago. So, but all of these are long terms, as you can see. The move in 2008. I think they were all 20-year terms on them with bumps in between. But at the time they were built, everybody had the same number. And it's very. I forgot the question was asked about. Yeah, it's. I just recalled it's a lot like the airports. Toronto Pearson used to have the same rent rate as Winnipeg until the airport authority showed up.
Okay. Do you have evidence as to the rents currently in those other markets?
I just came across one in Montreal at $27 a foot. And that one was a good location on the island, but I'm just trying to think of anything I've read recently on it. I guess there's probably market reports. I mean, typically, Vancouver, Toronto, you're going to see in the mid-20s.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld. I have no additional questions for you either. You haven't mentioned rebuttal, but I will ask, do you have rebuttal evidence that you'd like to present?
I have one more thing I'd just like to present verbally. Perhaps it's rebuttal.
Is it rebuttal?
It is in reference to its usage as a warehouse.
Okay,
I have just measured the distance at the front and the rear of the property, and it's 95 feet from building to property edge. You need 125 feet to do a turn a semi-trailer, a regular semi-trailer. If you have a B train, you need a lot more. So it's not conducive to warehousing.
okay. Mr. Harling, questions on that evidence?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thanks.
Mr. Marks?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harling, do you have rebuttal evidence?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you. All right, then, Mr. Neufeld, that will conclude your portion of this hearing on item number 1. So now we will move to Mr. Horsborough's presentation on item number 2, relating to the same property at 2529 Inkster Boulevard. So go ahead, Mr. Horsborough.
It's okay if I leave, because obviously I can't question, I can't add anything else. I'm done, right?
That's correct. You can leave if you would like, or you're welcome to stay if you would like.
I've got a lot of work to do. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neufeld. Have a good day.
You.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Horsborough, on to you and your presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll let the board know as well, I've also submitted rebuttal, formal rebuttal for this.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Okay, I'll get going then. And I'll try to keep my presentation somewhat brief. I think we're all going to be experts on know everything about this property by the end of this hearing. So quite an interesting situation to be in. First time I've been in a situation like this. But I also have been in a few hearings now where there are 2 assessors against me. So I don't know, it feels somewhat fair maybe that Rocky and I, do this one together.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a bit of humor for you. All right. 2529 Inkster Boulevard. So if the board will follow me along to page 3 of my disclosure. Subject property, as we've already discussed, a 29,730 square foot, classified as an industrial warehouse on a 2.8 acre parcel of land. M&P has determined a market value of $4,956,000 for the subject property. If we move on to page 4, we have the current assessment, and on page 5, we have M&P's evaluation of the subject property. Be somewhat interesting for the board and for Mr. Harling to see how 3 different people can come up with 3 different values for the same property. Sort of speaks to the nature of appraisal work. So M&P's valued the property. We've determined an appropriate rental rate of $9.50 per square foot, with a capitalization rate of 5.25%. So moving on to page 6 and 7, we have the assessment department's income derived model value for the subject property. And then moving through to page 8, we just have the aerial photograph and assessment map of the parcel. And then through pages 9, 10, and 11, we have some exterior photographs and aerial photographs of the subject property. So moving on to page 12, we have looked at a couple of similar properties. sort of as Mr. Neufeld had said, we try to look for clean leases. I'll speak in my rebuttal to what is a clean lease, I suppose, a bit. But anyway, M&P has looked at some similar properties. We've included a map here on page 12, just showing the location of these comparable rental rates in relation to the subject property. We can see that these rental rates average from anywhere from $6.50 a square foot to closer to $9 a square foot. If we move on to page 13, there are 3 properties that M&P felt were most similar to the subject. So we've got 2240 Logan Avenue, 300 Salto Crescent, and 92 Fennel Street. We see 300 Salto and 2240 Logan similar in size as well as effective age for the property as to when it was built. So if we move on to page, if you look at page 13 and 14, we've also included photos. 92 Fennel is a bit smaller than the subject property, but it's extremely close, a stone's throw from the subject. So $9.50 a square foot, pretty reasonable. 300 Salto, again, relatively close to the subject at $9.49 a square foot. Similar year built 2007 versus the subject built in 2008. And then another thing, when M&P, when we're valuing a property, when I'm looking at a property like that, of course, we apply the income approach, but then we also look at sales and we look at market activity. And we see, well, does our value fit with the market, and what properties that are similar, what are they transacting for? So page 15 does have some sales of similar properties. These prices have ranged anywhere from 85 a square foot to 174 a square foot. And similar to what Mr. Neufeld had mentioned, between the last reference period and the current reference period, there wasn't a lot of market activity in the industrial market. Again, the huge thing being interest rates. People said, wait and see. Went from a period where we had extremely low interest rates to quite high interest rates, relatively speaking. So we were able to find some sales. One of them occurred within the reference period here on page 15, but the other sales occurred prior to the current reference period. But we have adjusted for the change in market conditions. So the final column in this table on page 15 is the time adjusted sale price. So we've also then made an adjustment to reflect what would these similar properties have sold for if they had sold on the reference date, April 1st, 2023. And I've included information as to how we've derived what that time adjustment looks like. So I just wanted to point out some of the key factors on page 15 here. So the subject is assessed at $205 a square foot, which was a substantial increase from the previous cycle, over 40%. But then once we are looking at the property, looking at what an appropriate capitalization rate is, what a realistic market rent would be for the property, then we arrive at a value that equates to $166.71 a square foot, which falls right in line with what properties were selling for as of the reference date. On page 16, I've just included some support for the time adjustment. M&P has looked at some paired sales. So we've completed a paired sales analysis for a number of industrial properties, and we were able to derive what a market adjustment looks like, what that time adjustment looks like, what kind of appreciation are these properties seeing. So this table just breaks down the properties that we looked at when they sold, the sale price, and the annual increase that's been derived. We then took the average increase in terms of the sales price, 4.8%, and that's how we've arrived at the time adjusted sale prices. Pages 7 and 18 have just some exterior photographs of the properties that were just mentioned. Page 19 has the capitalization rate chart. So you might be wondering, why did M&P go with a capitalization rate of 5.25% when the city, their 20th to 80th percentile, 5.25 actually falls outside. And it falls outside of actually Collier's CBRE and Cushman and Wakefield as well. So the reason why we feel 5.25% is reasonable, well, we've looked at, 5.35% as being the minimum. And then we recognize the fact that the property is well located. So we don't see the property as being, in the 6 to 7% range for capitalization rate. 4.65% is too low, just with the interest rates, the way they were. No one can make a sale work. No one can make a purchase price work on that kind of a cap rate. It just, that's not the way the market operates. One of the problems with mass appraisal and having a model derived value, it doesn't factor in some of these issues. So 5.25%, while still being low, given that the property is somewhat newer, 2008 build, well located, good site, 5.25% is reasonable and well supported by these third-party market reports as well as the city's information. And then if we move on to page 20, I just have the conclusion again. Looking at a rental rate of $9.50 a square foot, a capitalization rate of 5.25%, and that's how we arrive at the market value of $4,956,000. And with that, I would welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horsborough. Mr. Harling, questions?
I just one question. Actually one of the cap rate question was already answered, so I appreciate that. But so just in terms of like the rent, I know we're not miles apart, obviously, but were you I know the previous presentation, there is that lease in place. Mr. Neufeld has obviously put his position on that rent. He believes why it shouldn't be included. Were you aware of that rent that they were paying at the time, or were you aware of the lease in place, I guess, for the property by any chance? Or
I didn't have the full details in front of me. I knew that there was some issue with the $15 a square foot rate. Our understanding that the parties were related, that there was some issue. I wasn't sure of the full picture. So actually it was insightful having Mr. Neufeld's presentation. But we knew that it wasn't a market rent. So we knew that there was something there that we were looking at, that $15. And we knew that there was something there that, kind of dirtied up the rent. And I wasn't fully aware of what it was, but Mr. Neufeld's explanation made sense to me.
Okay. Other than that, I think that's my only question then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harling. Mr. Whitbread, questions for Mr. Horsborough?
Just wanting to confirm that your comps that you've provided pictures for on page, well, you know where the pictures are, page 17, 18, 19 maybe, 18, 17. Are those all storage warehouses?
Yes, I believe so.
So I'm looking at a couple of them with extensive windows on the second floor. I'm assuming you haven't visited all of these?
So I have been to a few of them. I know 41 Packin Road, there is an office component there on the second floor. So 41 maybe wouldn't be the best comparable. But generally most warehouses are going to have a smaller office component, not enough that it's really going to change the rent, but they're going to have something for whomever is working there, even a lunchroom, something like that.
Yeah, because typically you wouldn't see windows on the second floor of a warehouse, but I understand the office component. What about Wall Street? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 service bays and fairly low height building. Is that a vehicle service or is that a warehouse storage?
So it would be kind of similar to the subject where it's a bit of both. And if you want to classify it one way or another, arguments can be made on both sides. So I think Wall Street is interesting in terms of the similarity in that sense, where it kind of functions as both.
Okay. I have no further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whibrad. Mr. Marks, questions?
Yes, on your comparable sales, were they of a similar business? On page 15?
Page 15, the sales. So yeah, these were all industrial properties. So like Wall Street, again, if you look at that one, sort of warehouse, sort of vehicle service. So these are all industrial. They're all classified as being warehouses. Whether or not they function exclusively as warehouses, or if you have some of that flex space, and they would have varying, sizes of office space. But essentially they all function as warehouses.
Sounds like it's kind of a gray area that with this.
It is to some degree.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was also looking at your rents on page 12. And these are also warehouses, correct?
That's correct.
Would they be configured similar to the to our subject property with the drive-in bays and loading bays and things like that?
They wouldn't likely have the same number as like of loading bays. They would have some loading bays, but looking at the subject property, it's probably more geared towards service garage. It could be used as a logistics warehouse as well, although you might want it to be a little bit larger. But they're similar in terms of the way the market would look at them and what kind of rent that they would be achieving.
Okay, so these would be similar. Your position is these would be very similar to our subject property,
but
in terms of what it does and how it functions.
In terms of how it functions, yeah, I wouldn't think any of these. Well, I know all these properties. None of them have 16 bay doors, but they're all classified as industrial warehouses.
Would they have bay doors though?
Oh, they would, yes, but
Okay.
but not like 16 is far too many for your typical warehouse. Like you're looking at 4 to maybe 8 at the most, unless it's a logistics warehouse.
Okay. Okay, I have no other questions then. You indicated, Mr. Horsborough, that you do have rebuttal evidence.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, just give us a minute to get that distributed.
Yeah, the rebuttal has been shared on SharePoint.
Okay,
and
thank
has
you.
been shared with the assessor as well.
Okay, thank you. We will just get to it then. Which for some reason it's not letting me. Just give me a minute. I have to re-enter. Okay, does everybody have it?
I'm just looking. Is it the one under number 7 orders, applicant rebuttal?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Harling, do you have the rebuttal?
I was sent something, so I believe this is the rebuttal. Yes, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead, Mr. Horsborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to submit a rebuttal just for a couple of reasons. So ultimately, we all know the way the Municipal Assessment Act works, with the onus being on the assessment department to prove that their value is justified. So I've looked into some of the evidence that the city is relying on to justify their model rent for the subject property. I did find some issues. So if we start on page 4 of my rebuttal, we'll start with rent comparable number 1, 1616 King Edward. And this, what I'm going to speak to here, maybe you'll see some parallels with what Mr. Neufeld was saying in terms of a clean rent. And of course, the city has the impossible job of trying to review every single lease that they have information on. Of course, it's not possible for them to do this. So I have looked at 1616 King Edward, And if we look at the permits and the stuff that's publicly available information, and when the lease was signed for this property, it was substantially renovated for the tenant. So the rental rate that they're achieving on this property, well, some of that is because the landlord did a huge renovation. So it's not a clean rent. We can see here that the renovations included the demolition of existing walls, construction of new walls, removal of old floors, installation of new floors, removal of old ceilings, doors, installation of new ceilings, doors, and electrical and mechanical work. And then on page 4, we can see the exterior photograph that, yeah, they also did some painting. And then I'll also note that in terms of location, they're in, one property is in the Inkster Industrial Park, and the other one is in, or the subject property is in the Inkster Industrial Park, whereas 1616 King Edward is in the St. James Industrial Park. And again, you'll see maybe another parallel with something Mr. Neufeld was saying. The St. James Industrial Park, we're seeing zoning changes allowing for more commercial and retail uses, which is driving up rents in that neighborhood. Whereas the Inkster Industrial Park, the zoning is still geared towards industrial uses. If we move on to page 6, comparable number 2, 171 Cole. Again, this property was renovated for the tenant. I've included the permit information. And then again, this property is located on the opposite side of the city from the subject. Cole Avenue is in Elmwood, and the subject property is in the Inkster Industrial Park. So 2 different industrial markets. Page 8, you know, it's kind of too bad Mr. Neufeld isn't here, because he was asking about 91 Lowson Crescent, and here we have it. So it did used to be artificial ice. However, now it's not. But again, this property as well was renovated for the tenant and is in a different industrial market. It's in the Tuxedo Industrial Park. Rents are highest in the Tuxedo Industrial Park of anywhere in Winnipeg's industrial space. And that's on page 9. I'll try to, you know, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, so I'll move through this.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
1100 King Edward, again, renovated. I've included permit information. It's also important to note for this one, it's actually a secure compound at 1100 King Edward. So we've got intercoms and security gates. On page 12, I've included a map just showing 3 different security gates with intercom system, motorized security gates. Comparable 5 on page 13, Clarence. Again, I've included photos and permit information. Property was renovated for the tenant, not a clear and clean lease. And then I'll speak to page 15 as well, 195 Haggart. This is a brand new Class A industrial building with 38-foot clear wall heights. And then I'll just bring the board's attention to page 16. I've just included a brief kind of description of the differences between Class A industrial properties and Class B industrial properties. And then my final note is that comparable 7, 2475 Day Street is a steel plant, not an industrial warehouse. And that will conclude my rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsborough. Mr. Harling, questions on the rebuttal?
Just a very basic quick question. So I know you've indicated some of these comparables. You say they're not clean leases. What do you mean by that? Like, have you seen any of them? Like, have you seen the actual like income statements from the subjects to verify if they're actually like the lease was like a net lease, or if it was good lease in place, or?
No, so I haven't reviewed the individual leases for any of these properties. I have enough experience to know that landlords don't renovate these properties out of the goodness in their hearts. They're doing it so they can get a higher rental rate.
Oh, okay, so but you're acknowledging they are, like, you're not disallowing, saying that they're not actual leases in place. You're just saying, you're just indicating that they're higher because of some of these renovations is what your position is, I guess, or?
Exactly. A portion of that rent is the recovery of the cost of renovating these properties.
Okay, but like you said, you haven't actually seen the leases, like the actual net leases or the actual lease in place. So you just based on what you've seen, that's the reasoning why.
That's correct.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marks, questions on the rebuttal?
Yes, all the subject properties you have there, they're basically a storage building and no service would be done, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question?
Yeah, so these buildings don't have any service work done on them, they're strictly storage.
Yes, these are more of your typical warehouse.
So in that respect, it really doesn't relate to the building in question we're looking at today.
I would agree with that as well, that looking at the rent comparables provided by the assessment department and actually looking at the photographs, aerial properties, certainly none of them have the same level of garage doors. They seem to be more of your standard warehouses.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you. Can you tell me where you access this information?
So which, like the permit information is publicly available?
That's what I'm talking about. The comparables that you've got, all of this information, where did it come from?
So like the permit information is from the city website. So I was able to just pull that. Everyone has access to it. If you just search the address, you can pull up all the permit information. So I guess, like, for example, if we were to look at pages 4 and 5, the renovation information, these photos are just from Google Street View, and then the permit information is from the City of Winnipeg website, and then the location, that's just Google Maps.
So your point, and let's just use that page 4 and 5, then your point would be that what this property at 1616 King Edward is not perhaps as represented in the assessor's brief.
That's correct.
Because it's different now.
Yeah, so if you just look at the rental rate that's included in the assessor's brief and take it at face value and say, well, I suppose this is just what a market rent is, that's one thing. But if you actually investigate the property a little bit further, you see, oh, well, the landlord's done all this work to the property. That's why they're achieving this rate. Part of that is going to be the recovery of those costs.
On page 4, when you make the statement, an allowance for tenant improvements, that would not show up in the rental rate, would it?
Exactly.
And it would not necessarily show up in the rental roll.
Exactly.
Or in the financial statements in any respect, because it goes back to 2019, right?
It goes back to the negotiations between the tenant and the landlord, exactly what kind of work was going to be done to the property for the tenant, and the rental rate then negotiated based on the work that's being done.
Sure. May I redirect to Mr. Harling, please, Madam Chair?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Harling?
Yes.
You have access to this information on city rolls?
We would have access to the mailers, yes.
Yes. Did you investigate any of these properties in this light?
I mean, we looked at I can tell you that the rents, like when we include rents in our briefs, and we do verify the rents, we would go through them, we would make sure verify their actual net rents. So there's the rents I've chosen here have been verified in the sense that they are good rents. So I don't think there's a dispute in that. In terms of going through all the individual aspects of changes that were made, I didn't go through all those factors. So
okay, but would that maybe change your mind on some of the properties you've submitted as comparables? Had you done that and you saw that the tenant allowances and the amount of tenant allowances, that's number one, or number two, would it have changed your presentation in any way?
I mean, like I said, I had the comparables. I mean, Mr. Harvard has his position and what he believes there. So, I mean, I'm looking at the comparables, trying to find comparables that's similar to the subject. You know, honestly, no, I don't think I would change my position on that. No. So,
thank you for answering the question. I have no other questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Mr. Harling, did you have rebuttal?
no, I do not have rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. And I did forget to ask Mr. Neufeld this, but Mr. Harling, would you like to make a summary statement on this property?
I think we've heard this one a lot, so I think I'm just going to let the board make
Okay,
the evidence
Yeah.
and ask, keep it brief.
okay, thank you. Mr.
while.
Horsborough?
I'll spare the board and Mr. Harlan from hearing my summation.
Okay, thank you.
We've covered everything we can here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well then that will conclude item numbers 1 and 2 on our agenda. So let's move to our last item, which is item number 7.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
we've been going at this for 90 minutes. Could we have a 5-minute break, please?
sure. Let's do that. 5
Thank you
minutes.
very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're now dealing with item number 7 on our agenda, which is file number 24-458565 Monroe Avenue. Mr. Harling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, the file number is 24-458. The roll number is 020413311100. The address is 565 Monroe Avenue, and the owner is Number Company 101-28450 Manitoba Limited. 2025 roll year based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023 is assessed at $2,255,000. If you look under my prop description below, we'll see that this is classified as an industrial warehouse. It's a 1-story building. The actual years built range from 1956 to 1975, whereas the effective year built range from 1957 to 1975. And we are using an overall effective year built of 1968. If you look at the wall heights, they range from 8 to 18 feet. It's a steel and metal frame class construction. It is zoned for M1 manufacturing light. We have a land area of 92,486 square feet with a plan area of 29,248 square feet, which then gives us a land to plan area of 3.16. And then lastly, we have a total leasable area of 27,688 square feet. If we turn to page 3 of my brief, we'll just see the request for income information I've received. And if you look at the bottom of page 2, you'll see the most recent sale occurred on August 8th, 2022. And we have no leases in place as it's an owner-occupied property. Okay, if we turn to page 3 of my brief, we'll see the subject location. As indicated, this is on Monroe Avenue. So this is a Google image or aerial view so you can just see where the subject's located in red. So just adjacent to would be Gateway Road, and then Monroe eventually would reach Henderson Highway if you just keep going west on Monroe. Turn to page 4. This is just a further photo of the subject, just to show us where it's located. Page 5 of my brief. This just shows the parcel outline of the subject at the top there. And at the bottom, we can also see another outline of the subject just to show the property, how it's situated on the parcel of land. We turn to page 6 of my brief. This is just a aerial view photo just of the subject facing Monroe Avenue. So you can just kind of see the property in its entirety. This is continued on page 7. This is just another view from the subject from closer to the rear. Page 8, this is just, again, another photo from the rear of the subject. And page 9, this is just another view of the subject property looking at from the west side. And then at the bottom of page 9, I have a street view photo of the subject facing Monroe. So this is the front of the building where the office portion is. And then pages 10, this is just further down. And then the bottom of page 10, this is just further east or west of the subject, just closer to the end, more of the warehouse space. Okay. If we turn to page 11 of my brief, we'll see the income workup. As indicated, this is a storage warehouse, or classified as a storage warehouse. We have a total leasable area of 27,688 square feet. We're applying a model rent of $5.56 a square foot, which gives us a total lease or a total potential rent of $152,945. Relying 1.5% for vacancy, which then gives us an effective gross income of $151,636. Relying 3% for non-public expenses, as well as $4 a square foot for shortfall, which then gives us a net operating income of $145,426. And then lastly, we're applying an overall capitalization rate of 6.45%, which gives us the estimated value of $2,255,000. Okay, if we turn to page 12 of my brief, you'll see the rent comparables. So I have a number of comparables here. So the lease start dates range from November 1st, 2019 to May 1st, 2022. These terms range from 2 to 7 years. Leasable areas range from 21,080 square feet to 37,797 square feet. Wall heights range from 14 feet to 26 feet. Effective view rates range from 1964 to 1982. And the rents in place range from $5.95 a square foot to $9.32 a square foot. Just some of these locations here. Some of these comparables I've used in the previous property. So yeah, some of these are located in St. James. Some of these are located in the Inkster Industrial. Just trying to find comparables of similar size and age and wall height again would be why I've expanded my search. There's not a lot of tenanted buildings of this size in the area, so that's why I had to expand my search a bit. So these are the comparables, and I believe they would bracket the rent that we applied. Okay, turn to page 13 of my brief. Just in terms of cap rate, again, we're applying a 6.45% cap rate. So if we look at the cities with 20th, 80th percentile, so that would fall within the range of what we've been given for cap rates. And then further looking at the outside sources, I believe the cap rate of 6.45 would be supported by some of the outside sources. If you look here, it's an owner occupied building. So it's more classified as a single tenant, if you will, building. So, but I believe the cap rate would be supported by the outside sources. Okay, page 14, my brief. It's just a municipal assessment accuracy information. If we turn to page 15 of my brief, we'll just see the income expense memo that has been supplied. As you can see here at the top, they've checked off fully owner occupied. So again, there's no rent in place, but it is just they were compliant with supplying the mailer. This is continued on pages 16 and 17 and 18. We turn to page 19 of my brief. This is just a site plan. I was able to find a file a bit older, but you can kind of just see the site, the subject property itself, and just the site plan, the breakdown. And then if we turn to page 20 of my brief, this is just the building sections or just the details. So this is just to show the different buildings of when they were built, the different ages and the wall heights of them. So just to give you a breakdown, because as indicated, it was built in 1957 up to 1975. So just to give you a breakdown of the different ages and when some of the buildings were built at different times, and just the wall heights that are applied to those properties or those buildings at the time. And then lastly, if we turn to page 21, this is just the jobs report vacancy to support the vacancy report or the vacancy we have applied. And I believe that would conclude my presentation, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harling. Mr. Horsborough, questions for Mr. Harling?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Harling, were you aware that the property sold in May of 2022? Or
yes,
sorry,
correct. Yes, no, I was aware of that as I put in the brief. Correct. Yeah.
Are you aware that the property is contaminated?
Yes, it is on the impacted site list. I'm aware of that. Yeah.
So, and then again, I guess I should just ask the value. It's the model derived value, correct?
It is model derived, correct? Yes.
Is there any way for the model to factor in contamination?
You know what? Like, I mean, when it comes to contamination, we don't have something we would add for example. You know, I'm mindful of the fact that it's on the impacted list. You know, it is an industrial site. I mean, I'm not making this. I'm not trying to make a statement of just saying, oh, you know, every site is contaminated. But you know, when it comes to industrial land, there is a lot of sites that are impacted that still do sell and that still do. You know, people will tend them out. So I'm mindful of the fact that it is on the list, but no, I don't have anything specific that we would add to, let's say, to adjust for that or anything like that.
No. Okay. And just kind of generally speaking, there's nothing in the model, like the city can be aware that the property is contaminated, but there's nothing in the model that adjusts for that.
I don't have anything that I could add per se. No, at this time, no, nothing. I don't have anything or no the knowledge of that at this time. So,
okay. And you haven't made any adjustments to the assessment to reflect contamination?
No, I would not.
Okay, those were just my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horsborough. Mr. Whitbread, questions for Mr. Harling? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I do. Do you know if there are any covenants on the property, Mr. Harling?
As far as I know, I didn't run a title search, so I don't have that information on hand, so
Okay, so you don't know.
I don't know at this time.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any information about the level of contamination on the site?
In terms of level, no, I believe there's like when I looked at the environmental report or on the Manitoba contaminant registry site, I believe there's something VOCs and there's another type of contaminant. So yeah, I can't remember the exact. I think Mr. Harbour has that information in his brief, but I don't have the top of my head. I don't know the levels, I guess, or how high it would be. So
Yeah, and I didn't see anything in your brief that talked to contamination at all.
no, I don't have anything in there at all. No.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marks, questions for Mr. Harling?
No questions from you this time. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harling, the vacancy rate of 1.5, is that based on the market area? It differs from other areas, is that right?
Yeah, correct. Like, I mean, like I said, we typically will look at like, various outside sources, as indicated, like this would be classed more in the Elmwood area of the city. So as you look at my brief on page 20 or my John's report on page 21 does show that vacancy as of the end of 2022 is roughly 1.1%. So we're within that range. So
okay. And you indicated buildings on this site. Are they, when I'm looking at the pictures, it looks like it's all one but joined together? Is that how it is, or are they all separate?
yeah, like they're all joined. It's kind of like a piecemeal situation, right? They were built in different ages.
Okay.
So there'd be additions and things of that nature, henceforth why some are older than others. Yeah. So, but I mean, overall, it's like, I'd say like I said, we have an effective age of 1968, but it started in 56 and the newest portioning was built in 1975. So.
Okay. And with this configuration, would it be sort of only special uses or special types of uses for it? I mean, it's quite chopped up by the looks of it.
I mean, like there actually are a number of buildings, like especially older buildings that we see built in different stages. So I mean, it's like it's got some office space and some warehouse space. So I don't reason why it couldn't be used for, there's any limit on what it could be used for, like, other than storage. It is classified as a storage warehouse though, yeah. So
and that's its use also, storage?
Yeah, for primary, like I mean, I know the tenant in there. Like I said, unfortunately have not inspected the particular property. I've been past it many times. So, but yeah, we classified as a primary use as storage. So yeah.
Okay. And your rental comps, are they used for storage purposes also?
Yeah, these would be the majority of these comparables went through would be, I believe, actually, if not all of them, would be of some storage use. Yeah, from my recollections, yes. So
okay. You're lower than all of your lease comps. Your model's lower.
I indicated, like I tried to, like, I mean, there's not a lot of lease comps in the area. So I like I said, I did have to expand a bit. So I'm mindful of, like, location would have a factor on rent. So but yeah. So yeah, but I understand that. Yeah, that some of these are higher. Some of these would be, you could argue would be superior in the sense. So like, for example, like the one in 333 debates, it's a bit newer, it's got higher wall heights. So I won't dispute something of those ones would be superior in that case. So that one is probably one of the closer ones in the same Bombs Industrial Park, but I won't dispute that it is a superior building though. So
okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Harling. Yes, Mr. Whitbread.
Yeah, just one question, if I might. Sorry, I missed this question. When I'm on page 15 of your evidence, I'm looking at the financials. How do you square up your 1.5% vacancy rate with the 10 to 12% vacancy rate indicated by the tenant, Mr. Harling?
Well, it's see, that's I don't know why they put that, because it's a fully owner occupied property, so there would be no vacancy. So I'm not sure why they would put that in there. Like, I mean, it's owner occupied, so there would be no vacancy. They're not tenanting out the space. It's like the owner's using it for their own uses. So I'm not sure why they would put a vacancy rate of that when it's like. Okay,
so Western Millwork is actually the owner then?
Yes, correct. Yeah, they're not the tenant. No, they own the property. Yes. So
thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Horsborough, your presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I should also make the board aware that I've also submitted rebuttal for this.
Okay. And before you begin, I note that your presentation is 289 pages long. I'm assuming you'll be providing us with a summary and not going page by page.
Yes, yes, don't worry. The majority is just the majority of the presentation, or of that 289 pages, is the addenda.
Okay,
So I've included like full environmental reports because the property's contaminated. But obviously,
okay. And we
I-
may have questions about that, but if you can hit the high notes, that would be
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
I would not torture any of you and force you to listen to me speak to a 300-page environmental report.
Thank you.
Very painful, for myself included.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I'll note, even though the disclosure is almost 300 pages long, the vast majority that we need to discuss is within the first 20 pages. So M&P, this is a sort of a unique situation where normally we're having to value a property from the kind of the ground up. However, this property within the reference period was purchased. So the property was purchased August 8th, 2022 for $1,800,000. If the property were worth $2,255,000, the assessed value, if that was the market value, then that's what the property would have sold for. So often we attend these hearings and we argue this and that in terms of what the value is. Here's a unique situation where we have the sale price as determined by the market, by a willing seller and a willing buyer. What M&P has done is that we've recognized the fact that this property didn't sell on April 1st, 2023. If the property had sold on April 1st, 2023, my disclosure would say, here's the purchase price on April 2023, and it would be 1 page long and not 300 pages long. However, we have a property here that was purchased about 8 months prior to the effective date. So we have adjusted that sale price to reflect that property has appreciated in value between the date of purchase and the effective date for the market value. So that's why on page 3, we have this requested assessment amount of $1,886,400. I should have rounded that down, just $1,886,000. Page 4 of the disclosure and page 5 just has the assessment valuation as provided by assessment and taxation. Page 6 just has the assessment summary as well. And then on page 7, I will start to kind of explain how I came up with the time adjustment. And I spoke briefly about the time adjustment with 2529 Inkster. I followed the same process. And then just pages 8, 9, and 10. On 8, we have the assessment map. Page 9, aerial photograph, and page 10, exterior photographs. Now on page 11, I just have, I think I've kind of summarized here on page 11 everything we need to know about the contamination, and hopefully we won't have to really reference anything in the addenda. I think on page 11 we have enough of a discussion that we can understand what the issue is with contamination. So arsenic, copper, lead, there is the groundwater is also contaminated. So the site is about as contaminated as a site can be, especially if you have groundwater contamination as well as soil contamination. Page 12, again, just more supporting documentation. Site is listed on the provincial registry. On page 14, I've just included the offer to purchase. May 18th. Okay, I had it noted as August 8th, but it was May 18th. So that's my mistake, and I've adjusted it from May to April 2023. So anyway, page 14 and 15, offer to purchase. See that my client purchased it for $1,800,000. It's listed right there on page 14. Western Millwork. Page 16, I've provided support for the time adjustment, just reflecting the property's purchased for $1,800,000 on May 17th, 2022. Between May 17th, 2022 and April 1st, the market for industrial properties appreciated, hence why I've requested $1,886,000. So I hope that makes sense. I'm conclude my presentation. I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horsborough. Mr. Harling.
Just one question I have is like, I know obviously you've relied on the sale price, is what your presentation is, or how you're looking at value. Is there any reason why you wouldn't provide a income workup by any chance, or a breakdown of like what the property be on it, like a income performance, why you didn't provide that, or showing a value in that idea, or why you wouldn't show like an income value, I guess, in the property?
Yeah, this is just it happened to be one of these occasions where, you know, I could spend all the time to put together an income valuation, but ultimately what we're trying to do with our income valuation, with our workup in terms of the value, what we're trying to do is reflect the market. So why spend hours preparing that kind of evaluation just to reflect the market when we have the market reflected right here? So I didn't feel it was necessary to go through the income valuation that way, trying to reflect the way the market thinks, when here I have the market right in front of me.
Okay, so and it is I guess it is an income producing property though, correct, as well, I guess, just for curious, but just a
if it weren't owner occupied, then yeah, it would be an income producing.
Okay. And just in terms of that sale, was it an open market sale, or to the best of your knowledge, I guess, or?
So that's a good question. It was purchased by the tenant. What that negotiation looked like, I don't know.
So I mean, I know you don't have would that potentially have any effect on the value potentially if it was between, in that case, I guess, or no?
Well, certainly. I mean, the tenant, they're trying to get the best price that they can get. The landlord isn't going to sell the property for less than they think they could get on an open market. They want to maximize what their return is. The tenant wants to acquire the property. Yeah, I don't see the property selling. Like, I don't see the landlord selling the property at a discount or anything like that, just because the tenant is interested in purchasing it.
Okay, so yeah, but it was okay, so intended purchase. So okay, you know what? I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Harling. Mr. Marks, do you have questions for Mr. Horsborough?
No, my question's been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Just a couple, if you don't mind. That 1,800,000, does that market value, as you've indicated, reflect the contamination on site, like a discounted price?
Yes, so the contamination would have factored into that purchase price. So they would have known, like, as far as I'm aware, and I've read through the offer to purchase, my client was fully aware that they were purchasing a contaminated site.
I read your entire 289 page document, so I want to ask you a couple of questions about it. Okay. Primarily in the purchase agreement. Are there any covenants in the property to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, there would be a restrictive covenant in the sense that the site couldn't be redeveloped until the contamination's been remediated. So that in itself is a restrictive covenant. I'm not aware of
any other covenant. I'm not talking about hydro or utilities. I'm just talking about contamination covenants.
So with the contamination, like, legally, there is a restrictive covenant in terms of if you want to redevelop that site, that land is going to have to be remediated. Say if you wanted to redevelop it, and we have, residential right across the street, say at some point that area wants, developers want to redevelop it. If you're going to, get the highest and best use out of that site, and perhaps, as we see, we have more industrial parks and pockets throughout the city. This is like a kind of your 1950s when this area was developed for industrial, and we've seen that all move out to other parts of the city. At some point, I would imagine in my lifetime, I'll see this area get redeveloped. And you'll see it's zoned M1, so light manufacturing. So again, it's kind of similar to St. James, where the city is slowly moving heavy industrial usage and zoning away into these industrial parks. So this is a property where, I guess, in terms of covenants, there would be a restrictive covenant in terms of you can't redevelop the site until it's been remediated.
Let me dwell on that for a moment then. Redevelopment to you would entail, well, let me ask it this way. If I just leveled the building and erected a new structure, is that redevelopment?
That would be a redevelopment. However, it wouldn't be allowed. You couldn't.
It wouldn't be allowed? And obviously, if you wanted to dig up and put a foundation in, that wouldn't be allowed either. Remediation would have to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that from what? Like, I don't see that anywhere in this report.
So I know
General
that.
knowledge that you have?
So yeah, I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute of Canada, and I'm a member of the Association of Assessing Officers of Manitoba. And so I've had experience in valuing contaminated sites.
Mhm.
And I was out in Brandon just this past fall, dealing with an appeal on a contaminated site. It was a gas station that was purchased, and it sold for $1. And the reason it sold for $1 is because in order to redevelop that site, you're going to have to excavate actually about 10 feet deep and remove all that material, pay for the environmental report. And that was a site where there wasn't groundwater contamination. So I've yet to come across a property like this where we have groundwater contamination in addition to soil contamination.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine that the cost of remediation for groundwater in addition to soil, all of a sudden these costs are exorbitant.
On page 250, there was discussion about a mortgage. Do you know if there's any difficulty in getting a mortgage for the $1,560,000?
I haven't spoken to my client as to what the financing arrangements looked like. But generally banks aren't crazy about lending to a contaminated site. So
Yeah, in the spirit of full disclosure,
yeah,
they would have to indicate that it was contaminated. But to
exactly.
the best of your knowledge, there was no difficulty. Obviously, they got the mortgage and the property sale has gone through.
Well, and I don't know what the loan to value ratio was. So I would imagine they probably would have had to put up at least 50% of the purchase price in liquid.
But you don't know that. You don't know that, though.
I haven't spoken to my client as to the conversations that they had with their
Right.
financial.
With the mortgage. I noted $50,000 had to be deposited to the owner, but that's a different matter, isn't it?
That's a different matter.
Okay. Has there been any difficulty getting insurance on the property? Do you know?
That's another very good question. Insurance, I wouldn't imagine would have been too much of an issue. Although, you know what, if the building burned down, all of a sudden you have to have remediation before you construct. So I would imagine insurance, yeah, that I don't know if it would have been an issue, but it would have been more expensive than for a property without contamination.
But you don't have any direct knowledge of the issues.
I haven't spoken to my client about that, no.
Okay. And you indicated no covenants. Nowhere in the plan have I seen anything about remediation of the property. There's no ongoing plan for groundwater testing, soil testing. Usually my experience would tell me that that would be part of remediation, especially on a site this contaminated. Can you comment on that?
So there is a continuing plan. I know I did view it online. I don't know if I included it in my disclosure.
No, you didn't.
But
Not
okay, so I
here.
didn't put it. So it's available online. If you look on the provincial registry, you can actually pull all that information. And I think it's every other year, it seems to be, there's a different document.
Okay. So all in all, the contamination didn't prevent or delay the sale in any respect. In your view, it may have affected the pricing, but otherwise the sale went through and the new owners are operating under the same framework, the same business model that was in place prior to the sale.
That's to the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread. Mr. Marks, questions?
No, I think we know.
Thank you. I have a question about the sale. You indicated it was sold to the tenant. Was it ever placed on like a multiple listing service or something like that? Was it marketed broadly, I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. As to an exposure period, I'm not aware if it was a private negotiation or if there was like a marketing period and, you know, Colliers or Capital, if an agent was retained to market the property. I'm not aware.
Okay. Could that have affected the sale price or influence the sale price if you have one interested party who happens to also be the tenant trying to purchase the property versus there's no competition for this property, it's in other words, right?
Yeah, I generally I would say a tenant is going to be willing to pay a premium for the property, because if you think about it, if they get sold from out under them and all of a sudden they're negotiating with a different landlord, A, they may be facing a high rent increase, or B, if they're going to move, you know, this is a millwork company, right? So they've got all this machinery in the building. The cost of disassembling some of this machinery and then moving it, if anything, the 1.8 million would have been a premium if it hadn't been marketed widely. Like really, the tenant was motivated to acquire the building because they would have had to face the exorbitant costs of moving and disassembling all this equipment, and then the cost of having to shut down business for however many weeks it takes to move all that equipment.
I guess balanced against that too is knowledge of the contamination and what it means to the owner. Should the owner have to, let me ask you this, if the owner was to, no, obviously they didn't have to. If the owner was to sell to a third party, that third party would have been on the hook for some sort of remediation if the use changed, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, all things considered, if my client had, or if anyone had really asked me, I'm looking to buy this property, 1.8 million is a little bit high, in my opinion, but you know, that's what my client paid for it. So I'm not going to come here and say, yeah, the property's only worth 1.1 million. You know, it's worth 1.8
Okay.
plus the appreciation over between the reference period and the sale.
Okay. Okay. And I believe you answered my question, or the question I had about why not done on an income approach. Mr. Harling asked you that, so I appreciate that. Okay. Do we have rebuttal for this one, Mr. Horsborough?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I submitted the rebuttal on the SharePoint. You can refresh your SharePoint and it will be there. And I've shared the same with the assessor as well.
Thank you very much. I don't see it.
At the end, item 7, at the end.
Ah, got it. Thank you. And does everybody have it?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Horsborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my reason for submitting the rebuttal, again, more pertains to the Municipal Assessment Act, with the onus being on the assessment department to prove that their value is right. So I've looked at the market evidence as provided by the assessment department in support of the market rent that's been applied. So in my rebuttal here, I've just looked at each of the rent comparables, and I'll speak briefly. I'd be similar to the previous property. So starting on page 4, comparable 1, 1256 Sherwin Road. It's in the St. James Industrial Park, opposite side of town, different industrial market. 2136 Notre Dame Again, we're out by the airport in St. James Industrial, a completely different industrial market. Comparable 3, we're in the Inkster Industrial Park, opposite side of the city. Again, completely different industrial market. Triple 3 debates. We're in the St. Boniface Industrial Park in Transcona. Again, different neighborhood, different market. Comparable number 4, I've included on page 6. You'll have seen this page before, as this comparable is referenced in the previous item 2529 Inkster. So 2475 Day Street on page 6. Again, this is a steel plant in Transcona. Not so much the subject. If we move on now to page 8, I'll note that 89 Bunting was substantially renovated for the tenant. You can see the photo, the installation of new windows. Again, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record if I read through all the permit information, but I think I would imagine, I would hope at least that the board sees my line of thought here. But I'm open to any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horsburgh. Mr. Harling, questions on the rebuttal?
Not really questions. I think I've already kind of indicated that I'm mindful of some of these comparables. These comparables would be superior, just due to having some issues finding comparables closer. So yes, so our rent is lower anyway. So I think we've acknowledged that. So I don't have any issues with that. But yeah, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Marks, question on the rebuttal?
None for me. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Harling, do you have rebuttal?
I have no rebuttal. No, thank you.
Okay. Before we conclude, Mr. Harling, would you like to make a summary statement?
You know what? I think just to kind of things be that I think I'll just leave it at that. No, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Horsburgh?
No summary. I want to thank the board, yourself and the panel members, and I want to thank Mr. Harling as well. Mr. Harling and I, we were able to resolve 6 of the 8 items on the docket. So I wanted to thank Mr. Harling for the hard work he did. It was a pleasure working with him, and thank you to the board as well for your time today.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for your presentations today. And now that we are done, we've heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Carson.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
I know.